Welcome back, Goku's DBZ. This time we are checking out, in my opinion, 5 of the most criminally underrated games for the PlayStation Vita. Last time we checked out the Nintendo Wii. So with that said, got 2 honorable mentions. First up is a game I think frankly it deserves a little more love than it gets, as the fact it plays in fact very differently than that of Smash. People call this a Smash clone, but with that said, I still think this game deserves more love than it got. I mean, it definitely had some cool characters. You had like representations for like Tekken with a Haji Mishima. You had Jack and Daxter. You had Dante from DMC. You had also somebody representing Killzone, and of course, also pretty awesome, the fact you had Parappa the Rapper, as well as Infamous series. And yeah, as you see down there, this was done by Blooper, which of course was the same company that did the remake of Demon's Souls, which is a game I recommend to a lot of people. Now, there is a lot of like DLC characters and stuff you could get at one time, but I think people actually need to check out this game more. Also, the stage transitions throughout the game is a lot of fun. Plus, you could also play with Dante. You also had Ratchet and Clank in it. You had representation also for, of course, Little Big Planet. You also had representation for God of War with Kratos, as well as Sly Cooper, as well as Nathan Drake for Uncharted, and of course, representation for Bioshock. So definitely some interesting games. I highly recommend more people check out this game, PlayStation All Stars. Second honorable mention goes to Fighting Climax, which has multiple characters from multiple different animes. As this is, after all, an anime fighter, though it was actually done by Sega themselves. And if you look in the backgrounds of some of the stages throughout this game, in all honesty, you will notice that there's a lot of like references to like the Sega Saturn and Sega Dreamcast in the backgrounds. Now keep in mind this has come from a longtime Sega fan going all the way back to the Sega Genesis. So I appreciate all these head nods this game has. But with that said, also you have definitely some very beloved characters, such as the top 2 protagonists from Sword Art Online, which is arguably one of my favorite more modern animes. With that said, it is a great anime fighter I do recommend, and it's probably one of my favorite handheld fighting games. First up, though, we have at number 5, I think one of the best crossover games that Capcom has done, with, of course, characters from the Tekken universe. Also, arguably, in my opinion, this game has probably the best actual opening cinematic of any of the Versus games, whether it be the Marvel vs. Capcom series, Capcom vs. SNK. I think overall, the Street Fighter Cross Tekken has easily the best overall intro. But yeah, some of the designs actually in game may not look the best, but I think this game more than makes up for its awesome actual mechanics. As how it plays with being a 2v2 game, it's definitely plays very different and very unique compared to many other Versus games that Capcom has done over the years. I am a big fan of this, and I love the fact that you have 2 final bosses in this game, which you unlock when you beat them. You have Ogre representing Tekken, and you have Akuma representing Street Fighter. It definitely has some interesting combinations. One of my personal all-time favorite teams in this is probably, I would say one of my favorites is probably Kazuya teaming up with actually Bison is probably one of my personal favorite teams. But with that said, let's get on to number 4. Now, of shooters, a lot of people constantly mention, of course, the Vita port of Borderlands 2. And also, a lot of people always mention, which is arguably probably the best FPS game on the Vita, is by far Killzone Mercenary. I do think Unit 13, though, is more. It's the real criminally underrated game. It's another superb, great FPS experience on the Vita. If you've not had, I do recommend picking it up, as you can get this game very affordable. You can probably find this game for maybe around the 20 some range. So yeah, compared to many other games on the Vita, this is a much more affordable, and yet also has a two-player co-op mode. So if you and your buddy both have Vitas, tag team together through the game. It's a lot of fun, honestly. But even in single player, it is a solid overall experience, and it's probably one of the best first person shooters you're going to be able to play on a handheld. I think it actually stands up very well. I would probably put this as my second favorite behind Killzone Mercenary, but I do think, though, this is the most underrated shooter on the Vita as a whole. Coming in at number 3, I actually have this game also digital, which is why this copy is still factory sealed, because this is starting to become a collector's item now. But with that said, if you love tactical RPGs like the Final Fantasy Tactics series, or many other greats out there like Front Mission, or Front Line, I should say, Mission. If you like tactical RPGs, this is a great experience, honestly. The best way I know how to describe this game is Final Fantasy Tactics meets Dark Souls. Because this definitely has Dark Souls level difficulty, if not in some ways. I actually think this game is maybe just a little harder than Dark Souls. At least with Dark Souls, you can learn attack patterns and stuff, where this is a tactical RPG, so you can't exactly move around freely. And because of that, it makes it, I think, higher difficulty game overall. So you just have to adjust to it. Now, this was also released on, I believe it was released also on the PS4, but as a whole, I think this is one of the best RPG experiences on the Vita. If you get a chance, I do recommend checking this out. It really is currently underrated, and I think the reason it's overlooked is because of the high difficulty curve on it. But as somebody who does like, on occasion, likes to be a bit of a masochist and have very good hard difficulty games, this is definitely one that will scratch that itch if you enjoy good challenges in your games. Next up is another. If you like games like, say, Monster Hunter and stuff, I would say this is arguably one of the most criminally underrated, definitely monster experiences. And the combat is superb and excellent, but then again, Koei Tecmo Team Ninja were involved in the creation of this game. You could definitely see elements in this that were also used later on another little Dark Souls-like game many moons ago. But yeah, I do highly recommend checking this game out. If you love good, solid, overall fun combat with a decent level of difficulty, I do highly recommend this, especially if you love games just going around fighting giant, awesome boss fights. This is definitely one I highly recommend to anyone out there. And as well as the fact, as long as Team Ninja is involved, that the gameplay is going to be great. Last but not least, yes, it gets praised, but it deserves it, and I still think it's criminally underrated versus many other games. I consider this the must-have game for the Vita. For me, number one, I think most criminally underrated game on the Vita is, or as a whole, looking at the wider landscape of games, I do think Gravity Rush still does not, by the people who have actually played this game, yeah, this game is very highly beloved with one of the most dedicated, hardcore, I would say, fan bases of any game out there. But there's a reason why we are very passionate about this game. One, the music. The soundtrack to this game is absurdly good. with like pleasure quarter music is great. Really upbeat, energetic. Also, I love the art style they went with in this game, with a sort of a mix of like cell shade with others. And I love the world. I love just the gameplay. And this game can be challenging, definitely with some of the special bosses or some of the side secret bosses, which aren't as easy to find unless you spend time. But you definitely need to level up your gravity gauge and ability, how long you can stay in the air, in order to fight these specific bosses, as most of them fly around, so you definitely have to build up. So that is something to keep in mind. But for me, number one most criminally underrated game on the Vita by far, or in general, in my opinion, is Gravity Rush. Between the music, the art style, the combat is fun, the characters I love, and the fact they don't use traditional CG like cutscenes. Instead, they do it in like an interactive comic book format, which I love even more. And the fact there are like secret side paths to some places you go, which you end up finding special super bosses, which do pay off given how much like crystals you can get in return, as that is the platform of how you level up. This has elements of both an RPG as well as elements of a platformer mixed into one. With a very well refined, I think, overall gameplay, and the fact that it is more interactive when you use abilities like Gravity Slide, works great with the motion sensors built on the Vita, as well as you can do stuff with the touchscreen, which also is great. But with that said, tell me what, in your opinion, are the best, most criminally underrated games on the Vita. I'm curious what your opinions are out there. With that said, I'll see y'all next time. And if you're curious about the music in the background, it's from the YouTube channel Lo-Fi Girl. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time.